Good morning, friends. I'm going to do another semi-wandering talk. They're not too long. Screen tests, by the way. Thanks to Sam for sharing some early versions of the video he's working on, in which I'm included. That's very helpful to me to see where that's going. That's being done by a professional videographer, which I am not. So I'm like a dude with Camtasia. So when I see a professionally done YouTube, it helps me think of the future a little bit, which is always an interesting way to look at things. Where are things going? And so I've got this channel, and what I want to talk about here is overview. Even though I wander around, I have overview in mind. I want to talk about, so what are we trying to accomplish? Like, I'm coming to the public with this very obscure way of teaching, like multiplication, like, oh, another culture, another tribe, another planet, another civilization might have decided that if they wanted to do 4 times 8, they'd start with like 2 bamboo sticks. You stand on the beach, you open these 2 bamboo sticks at 60 degrees, and then you go up one stick, one number, and the other stick, the other number, the 2 that you're trying to multiply, right? You got a binary operation like we have in Python. I'm going to touch on Python too. I've been working in the last like 3 videos on developing like a dog class. This all ties in, by the way. My proposal is, let's teach the Bucky way of doing math, not to the exclusion of anything, however. So I'm not saying, oh, let's drop what we're doing and forget 2,000 years of civilization and teach them this weird, they'll just say this is another weird new age hippy-dippy thing that's just trying to confuse our kids. I mean, I'm anticipating. Actually, they haven't gotten that coherent yet. But once they decide they're against this for some reason, whoever they are, they're going to say, I'm trying to replace, or we, the Bucky cult, is trying to replace everything square. Everything square. They're trying to take away our squares. Second Amendment, man. So we got to be able to wedge this in without causing that much trouble. And of course, you've probably been listening. If you've listened to my rap at all, you know that I have kind of a 2-phase approach. One is to introduce dot notation, since we have to learn coding anyway, and the object-oriented programming is built on dot notation. So if I change this dog that we've been working on to a generic polyhedron, what can polyhedrons do? Generally, they can spin a certain number of degrees. We could say we expect an integer there. We'll go down to 1 degree and no more or less, just for fun. And what we're returning is another polyhedron, type of the self, once we've got the right parameters. So we'll just call maybe the superclass, I don't know what we're going to do. So there's spin, and there's translate, and there's scale, and so forth. Translate does not mean to turn it into Spanish or English. It means to move it to a new XYZ coordinates position. And again, we're going to return a new polyhedron is what I recommend. You can just go like that, or maybe whatever. Why? Because in functional programming, we learn that we don't want to just change the state of a thing. We want to give back a new one and leave everything immutable. In other words, if your sculpture changes its position, create a whole new sculpture right next to it that's a little bit different. And if that changes, create another one next to it. In other words, every frame of film in a cartoon you need. Mickey Mouse has to be in every position. So immutability just means the past is the past and you can't change it. So you can go back and edit, but don't think of that as actually going back and changing the past. You're editing, okay? And then finally, I'm not really doing all this right now because I'm trying to stick with the overview. We would have rotation. No, spin and rotation are the same. I'm sorry. In fact, I don't like spin. Spin is not good enough. Spin, rotate, translate, and what? Scale. I'm going to return nothing for now because I'm trying to outline code, not actually code. But I want to have placeholders. I have other videos already where you can go and see full implementations of these ideas with subclasses as other named polyhedrons and so on. But what we've been doing here is sort of starting fresh, taking a fresh look at Python, starting all over, and saying, okay, we can use object-oriented programming as a side benefit of learning this weird alien way of doing math, which goes on to polyhedrons of whole number volume, right? This tetrahedron of unit volume, an octahedron of the same edge length, has a volume of 4. And this has a volume of 1, and also the edges are all 1. So we're in that very simple world that we want to be when we're at the basis of the mathematics. Here's the Tetra book and so on. So we're doing all this Martian math and stuff. Why? What's the payout? Do we care? So what do I do with it? Well, I think a lot about just humanity in general, and you've got a lot of Fukushima stuff going on over in my viewing history right here. It's not like I'm always watching Fukushima stuff, but this is March, and that's the anniversary month, and the Olympics, March next year, we're going to be right on top of the 2020 Olympics in this part of the world. So I'm a year ahead, as are the PR companies, as to how all this is going to be spin doctored. And what I say is you need to have a lot of science in your language, in your science fiction, to do good, believable spin. And I'm not going to lecture you on what that is regarding Fukushima. I'm just saying if you learn your hard science and the hard facts like plutonium, you can't just sweep it or bury it or something. You can bury it, actually. It's probably the best thing. But what's going to keep it from leaching out? And right now with Fukushima, we're way past how do we bury this. It's leaching out all over. And the question is, because the corium actually melted down. It's the China syndrome scenario, right? And they have big plans and huge amounts of money that are committed to getting that corium back. But at the moment, it's loose in the environment, and no one knows exactly what's going on with it. And measurement, as friendly gesture to Japan, instead of really focusing on health threats and really taking it all very seriously, we're kind of being political about it, which means we kind of treat it as entertainment, which it is. I agree. I mean, the world blowing up would be entertaining for about an hour, and then we're all done. This gives people a foretaste, anyway, of what it's like to not be able to go back. I mean, we saw that in Chernobyl. We almost saw it in 3 Mile Island. But to have a huge part of Japan be uninhabitable and the island is already so crowded, to have this happen there and to have this permanent no-go zone is, at least humanity gets to see for itself the consequences of what it's attempting here in terms of nuclear energy, which is everywhere. We've got 100 plants in the U.S. A lot of them are outside their pole date by a long shot and are being extended, therefore. This is old, we never expected it. It's not rated for over 30 years. The people who built it never promised it would work more than 30 years, but we haven't built any new ones. This is it. We got to keep using it. Push come to shove. Now, is that the kind of planning that went into it in the first place? The people who sat down, did they picture a future where people were going to just keep building these things, and so this would be easy to retire in 30 years because people would have the next generation be safer and better? Obviously, nuclear energy was here to stay. But what happened politically is people became very distrustful, and no more were built, and so now they're all untrustworthy, and we're in a bind. And it's because you can't really plan the future if you don't take psychology into account, and that's not really done, and we don't really know how. In science fiction, they do it. But people from generation to generation, they truly do change. They're the same species, but mentally, if you look at the layers, we're not on the same page every layer. It's not like there's one global civilization either. So I oversimplify, but my point is, our generation, my generation, needs to focus on cleanup, and if people want to do that for a living, that has to be one of the major jobs out there. And if you say there's no money for that, I think we now have general systems theory, and so economics can go suck its thumb in a corner on that question. All right, so end of story there. I will just summarize and say the point is if we can wedge this into literature, American literature, and feel good about Bucky Fuller as being a great American, so it doesn't hurt. It's not like we're saying bad America. It's not history even. It's literature. I tried mathematicians too busy, no time. Forget about it. But literature's always been kind of squishy and always has to accommodate the recent past. So I think my proposal makes sense. I did try fighting the uphill battle in math, but math is immutable. All right. And anyway, interesting that we have more than one strategy. And I do think the design science revolution that Fuller predicted and hoped would save us did happen in a bigger way than maybe you think. In terms of the open source revolution, I have my how open everything shirt here, whatever. I'm going, I think, to OSCON this year. In other words, in my world, there is this thing called the open source revolution. It's still going on, and I think it's design science. So I think, in a sense, the good news is Fuller's projection that we would all perish unless we could get more into a designer mindset. I think we got into a more designer mindset. But now we're facing all these kind of bleak choices, and it doesn't solve the problem. It just sort of takes the thinking out of just purely political theater where we whine and don't do anything. All right, I guess that'll do for now. Talk to you soon.